Hi, I'm Tim Gillingham, your host for Gold Tips Aero University. Today the topic is why Gold Tip? What makes Gold Tip different than any other brand of carbon arrows on the market? What makes us better? A lot of people think that carbon arrows are kind of all created equal. We tend to disagree. And today we're going to show you some of those aspects that you should consider and hopefully inform you as to why you should choose Gold Tip as your arrow of choice. Now the first subject we're going to cover is durability. Now many of you heard about Gold Tip, the toughest arrow you'll ever shoot. It's tough. This arrow's super tough. Well, where does that toughness come from? Well, the Gold Tip process is a pre-preg rolled process, and what that means to you, the end consumer, is we have an all-carbon shaft here. It's 100% carbon. When you see the Smart Carbon logo that you have, on the boxes and on the arrows and on the advertising, what is this referring to is how these particular arrows are made and what type of carbon fiber is used in the process. This is 100% carbon. Okay, there's very little resin in this shaft. Okay, there's other processes similar to this particular arrow here. This is more of a pultrusion process. It has fiberglass in the middle of it. And it contributes to that durability and overall accuracy and longevity of that shaft. If we take this 55-75 here, one of the more popular shafts Gold Tip, has ever, built, you can see that it's extremely durable. It'll withstand an amazing amount of force. Whereas we take this other particular arrow here, and if we bend it, we start hearing cracking, with very little bend, and if we bend it as far as we did the Gold Tip, boom, we're going to break that particular shaft. So these shafts, are not going to hold up as well as, say, the Gold Tip line. And whether you choose, the Velocity line, a lighter weight line, you're still getting that same legendary durability. The Kinetic line, which is new for Gold Tip in the last couple of years, extremely durable, very durable. The pre-preg rolled construction process is going to give you a much stronger shaft. Now on the subject of durability, one thing that construction process protects is accuracy. Now you can go through all the work to get all your arrows, spend the best money, the most amount of money on arrows possible. They're perfectly straight when you get them, but if that construction process does not protect that arrow, then what good is it? Now Gold Tip shafts, whether you pick the Pro Hunter here, or you pick a Kinetic, or you pick an ultralight, all these shafts are award-winning shafts. These shafts, these hunting shafts per se, have all been configured to win national competition. In fact, this particular arrow you see, this is a new Pro Hunter 300. I've actually put this in my quiver this year as my main field and outdoor target arrow. It's an exceptionally good arrow. I've also competed and done quite well with this Kinetic shaft. It's a phenomenal arrow. So if you look at the national pro level competition in 3D archery, where guys are using our target shafts, for example. This one here is a Gold Tip 30X Pro. These target shafts have been used to win 72 out of 78 men's pro division championship wins in ASA and IBO over the last 3 years. That's phenomenal. That's a phenomenal success. And I think the main reason is the top shooters in the country have learned to trust these arrows and rely on them and know that they're going to last better than anything else on the market. One of the things that Gold Tip does to ensure that accuracy and ensure that repeatability for the real serious shooter out there is, on our pro grade shafts. When you buy the premium grade shafts, anything weight sword graded plus or minus 1,000 straightness, plus or minus half a grain, or anything that has that plus or minus half a grain spec on it, you're going to find this weight code, simple things like this weight code sticker, like on these Laser Pro crossbow bolts. That allows you as a shooter to match those particular arrows, to the previous ones that you had. Gold Tip has, sold this 55-75 ever since it's been in existence. So it's ammunition. Once you find something that works for your bow, you're always going to be able to get it from Gold Tip. There's a lot of little things that you might take for granted that make Gold Tip an easier arrow to work with. For example, refletching. Refletching is something that we as archers do all the time, and many of you have probably refletched arrows, and you take your knife here and you shave your vanes off, and you always take a piece of carbon with it. Due to the construction process of the gold tip shaft, these are very easy shafts to work with. You don't have to worry about lifting a piece of carbon up when you're scraping an old fletching off, okay? Another thing that I do quite often is I use acetone. If I have especially when I have a nice colored shaft like this Ted Nugent shaft here, simple little things like I can just simply trim this, down to the base of the vanes, stick it in acetone, pull the knock out, of course, stick it in acetone for 15 or 20 minutes. These shafts will not be affected by that, and it'll make your refletching job that much easier. There's other things like our weight system, for example. Gold Tip has a F.A.C.T weight system. I think you've seen that in some of our advertising. What the F.A.C.T weight system is a simple weight system that allows you to fine-tune your setup. If you want higher FOCs or you want to be able to experiment with it, it's not a permanent solution. What I have in my hand here is a kinetic insert, okay? And I've got two 20-grain F.A.C.T weight systems on here. I mean, you can configure this before you put it into the shaft, or you can configure it after you put the shaft together. Now, for example, let's take this kinetic shaft here, and let's say we want to put a 20-grain weight system in here. What we'll do is we'll take our weight wrench here, put the weight on the end of the wrench, stick it into the end of the shaft. Now, this is available for all of our target shafts, and all of our hunting shafts. This allows you to customize your particular components, and you're not lumped into one group fits all kind of, for the components that you might want to use. And the nice thing about it is if you don't like it, if it makes it worse, it's reversible. Just another little thing that makes Gold Tip more appealing and more versatile to the end consumer. Gold Tip has a versatile amount of components available for our particular arrows to fit you, the end consumer. If you're a finger shooter, for example, you might want to shoot the standard GT knock. It has a longer throat and a little bit more comfortable, here on a finger release. If you're a release shooter and you shoot a loop, you might like the new Aculite knock that comes on the Velocity line standard. This will fit the majority of your pro hunters and XT hunters and expedition hunters also. It's a very nice knock, works well with a loop. New for this year, you'll see on this particular kinetic, I have a unibushing on here. This unibushing will accept a G-knock style knock. I have a Boning F knock here into a unibushing style option. We can pull some other options out of the box here. We have a pin knock system here. What the pin knock is it's an aluminum knock system. We have a small GT pin knock here, just another option. This works pretty well on bows up to 285 foot a second. If you get higher performance bows, you have another larger knock option here. Same pin, it's a universal pin. It creates a nice stiff rigid knock and really protects the back of your arrows quite well. But we have a bigger, beefier knock here designed to handle higher performance bows. In the target line this year, we also have a unibushing line that gives you the option of either using the Aculite knock or the GT knock into the bushing. So lots of knock options, lots of component options. In your target line, you have 3 point weights available for just about every shaft in the line. So you can use the F.A.C.T weight system, you can use the target components to really customize your setup and make it more user-friendly for you. Okay, moving on to another aspect of why Gold Tip, one of the things that our dealers truly love and you as the end consumer love is that you can always get the shafts that you've been shooting. A lot of the manufacturers will rebrand it, repackage it, put a new label on an old shaft, or call it something different, and then you can't get the same arrows that you've been using. The Gold Tip 5575 XT, I have in my hands here, has been built since the day the company started. You can still get it. You'll still be able to get this shaft 15, 20 years down the road. It's a phenomenal arrow, and we're not going to get rid of it. One thing we do in the line to simplify the line is to give it some cohesion. If you look here, you've got a pro grade shaft that has a yellow or a gold label. You have an XT shaft that has a green label, and you have a hunter shaft that has an orange or sometimes a white label. We try to keep this consistent across the line so that you start to recognize it. Okay, the pro grade is your best. It's a 1,000 straightness. The XT is a plus or minus 3,000 straightness, and the Expedition Hunter is a plus or minus 6,000 straightness. Now, whether you choose the Pro Hunter XT line or you choose the Kinetic line, The kinetic line will have the same 3 arrows, okay? Notice we have a Pro, we have an XT, and we have a Hunter. They all have the basic same color correlation and the same specs. Same thing in the velocity line. If we pick out the velocity arrows here, we have a Pro grade shaft, an XT grade shaft, and a Hunter grade shaft, all with the same color coding and the same specs. Now, there are various spines available in those different core lineups, and Gold Tip goes a little bit further than a lot of the companies. I mean, we, for example, build the kinetic in a 200 spine. No other company builds that in a hunting arrow. We find that there's a need for that. There's a lot of high poundage, bows on the market today. I mean, I'm a big guy. I shoot a lot of poundage. I need a heavy spined arrow like that 200. So we have a lot of niche shafts. If you look at the Levi Morgan Name the Game shaft, a lot of people like the way we do our camo finishes, and this is just a signature shaft for Levi Morgan and the Name the Game, Gold Tip's Name the Game TV show. Okay. Ted Nugent is a big supporter of ours, and in return we do a lot of work with Ted Nugent on his particular arrows, and you'll notice we've got 3 different arrows in 3 different colors for whichever one you like the best. Okay. We build niche shafts like the Gold Tip's Big Game 100 Plus. This is a stiff, heavy-duty shaft, and it was the precursor to the Kinetic 200 shaft that I showed you. There's need out there for bigger and stiffer shafts, and Gold Tip is filling that need. The traditional shaft, very popular shaft of ours. It's a little heavier weight for the traditional shooters. It has a unique finish to it that looks almost exactly like wood. In fact, I've had a lot of people come up to me and ask me if it was wood. If you move into the target line, you'll see that we have 2 grades of straightness available here. Let's look at this particular, the XXX arrow, for example. In the XXX arrow, as well as any of our other target shafts, you have a Pro grade shaft, which is plus or minus 1,000 straightness, plus or minus half a grain. You have a secondary grade, which is, we call it just the basic XXX. It's a plus or minus 5,000 straightness, and it still has the same weight tolerances. All of our target shafts all carry a plus or minus half a grain weight tolerance. Even though they're not, this white label shaft is not as perfectly straight as the Pro, it still has the same weight tolerance. So if you're a shorter draw length archer and you're going to cut this shaft down shorter, you could make this shaft a lot straighter for a lot less money. So we have that consistency across our line that makes it easy for you to understand how to use our product line. Okay, now we're going to cover what I personally feel like is the most important attribute of a Gold Tip arrow and really answers the question, why Gold Tip? Now, that's smart carbon. Now, what smart carbon refers to is the arrow shaft's ability to maintain its straightness. It's the ability for, the shaft to protect that investment and the time that you put into, to really fine tuning your setup. Now, let's go over to the laser sorter here, and I'm going to show you this particular test and how it applies to your particular arrows. Okay, we're over here at the laser sorter. This is a type of machine that's similar to what sorts the Gold Tip arrows in the lineup, and it's a really accurate readout that tells us kind of what's happening with these arrow shafts. And what we're going to do simply, and we're not here to single anybody out, but just illustrate to you the difference in arrows and why Gold Tip is a superior arrow. Okay, let's take this particular arrow here for example, and you can do this at home on a spinner. You don't have a $10,000 machine like this to do it on, but you can use a simple arrow spinner to kind of see how your arrows perform. Okay, let's set this arrow on the laser sorter. Okay, it shows a straightness of 0.004, so not bad. That's really quite good actually. Now let's see what happens when we put a little bit of a bend in it. Okay, let's put a bend in it and put it back on the spinner. Okay, now look at that arrow. Now we're at 47 thousandths. Can you believe that? That's an amazing difference for just a simple little bend. That arrow's absolutely ruined, and a good example of why memory matters. Okay, let's go on to something else. Let's take this particular arrow here. Okay, let's set it on there and see what we get before. Okay, we got 5.7, basically 0.005. Okay. We have an arrow here that's quite expensive. These run somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 a dozen or more. Okay, let's put a little bit of a bend in it. Okay, and let's put it back on the spinner. Okay, 21 thousandths. Not nearly as bad as the first one we saw, but still a fairly substantial increase in actual run out. Not all that impressive for an arrow that runs $150 to $170 a dozen. Here we have a Gold Tip Pro Hunter 5575. Let's see what it does. Okay, 0.001. Okay, let's put a little bend in it. We're up to 0.007, so we've only gained in the neighborhood of 6. You know, it's pretty aggressive bend on the arrow, probably not something you're going to see, you know, in everyday shooting, but it just reiterates, you know, the difference in the different construction processes and what happens, you know, throughout the life cycle of that arrow. You know, if we're shooting and you got an arrow that's going to hold, you know, a 40 thou bend, that arrow is probably going to shoot out, you know, and a lot of you have probably heard people talk about, you know, shooting the spine out of carbon arrows, that you can shoot the spine out. I think really what they're seeing is what we've illustrated here, that over time, these particular arrows are going to lose some of their straightness, okay? And you notice I just picked that thing up and dropped it down. That Gold Tip arrow is starting to recover. And we can put some of these old ones back on and see what we still have. The 40 thou is still 40 thou. The 15 thou has gotten down to 10. So those are pretty aggressive bends that we're showing. It does show you that, you know, different shafts are made different. Take your own arrows at home and just see what kind of memory retention that they do have. I think you're going to find that your Gold Tip shafts are the best in the bundle. Okay, now that we've covered all the aspects of carbon arrows and showed you the differences in them, you know, illustrated on the laser sorter the difference in memory retention in carbon arrows, you know, you should understand that there are marked differences in carbon arrows and that all arrows are not created equal. I hope this answers the question for you, why Gold Tip?